Whew. All right. Hello, everybody online. Hello, everybody here. Just give me about 15 seconds here. All right. Whew. Hello, everybody. Hello, Brian and Linda and Jean online. Welcome to the Dharma Bum Temple's Loving Kindness class. My name is Alex. It is wonderful to be here with you tonight, as it is every time I do this class. This is a class and a meditation on loving kindness. The Buddhist word for this is metta, M-E-T-T-A. And this wonderful word, metta, comes from the Pali language, which is a language that's probably pretty close to what the historical Buddha spoke. They said he spoke the language of Magadha, which was one of the major kingdoms of India at the time. Back in the Buddhist time, India, as you know it now, wasn't India. It was like mostly like central and northern India. Even that was split up into about 16 different kingdoms. They were always fighting each other and gaining and ceding land and all that. But Magadha was one of the big kingdoms, so he spoke that language. And anyway, so this word metta, when translated into English, 2,000 years later, can mean a lot of different things. Loving kindness, unconditional friendliness, goodwill, concord, amity, inoffensiveness. And so because of the richness of this meaning, depending on who you do this practice of loving kindness for, you can use different words, and it's really the same thing. This word metta is just a wish to be happy, a wish for ourselves to be happy, a wish for others to be happy. And also it's a wish for ourselves and others to do the things that cause happiness. So we want ourselves and others to do the things that cause happiness. And if you know the motto of the Dharma Bum Temple, you know what causes happiness. So the motto of the Dharma Bum Temple is think good thoughts, speak good words, do good deeds. This motto is not new, is not just for Buddhism. Many different religions have kind of the same overall, just kind of general motto. But we really take it to heart here in Buddhism because we don't want to harm anybody, certainly ourselves. So, is there anyone here, this is your first time to the Dharma Bum Temple? Awesome, welcome. Is there anyone here, not your first time to the Dharma Bum Temple, but maybe your first time to Wednesday, the Love and Kindness class? Hey, welcome, guys. Welcome. All right, so I'm going to do something it's going to be a little bit of a different class. So we're going to have our loving kindness meditation. Of course, that's still going to be the same, but it's going to be shorter. And then afterwards, I'm going to tell a story. I love storytelling. All the stories that I tell are Buddhist stories. So it is the enlightenment story of the Buddha. So I'm going to be telling that story. It takes about 45 minutes and 40 minutes. And so we're going to have a quick meditation here. Our meditation isn't going to be as long as it normally is. So we're still going to do it. All right. Everybody get into your meditation positions. See what Jean say. Okay. I like my stories too. Thanks, Jean. I appreciate that. So let's go ahead and let's begin. So just allow your eyes to close. And at first, let's just get connected to the breath. Let's just take a deep breath all the way in. And all the way out. Not forcing it, letting the breath be quite easy and natural. And you can follow the breath in through the nose, into the heart, and then into the navel on the inhale, and on the exhale from the navel to the heart, out the nose. Or if you just want to focus on the base of the nostrils, you can do that too. Just getting our anchor, which is the breath, nice and solid, nice and stable, so we can really focus on our meditation. So just for the next few moments, just rest as gently as you can in the sensations of the breath. So to begin our practice of loving kindness, we're going to do this practice for our benefactor. And a benefactor is anyone who has shown us great love, great kindness, someone it's really easy to have these feelings for. You just think of this person and you call to mind easily the ways of which they have benefited you with their love and kindness. And you can either just radiate loving kindness to them, and however you understand that word radiate, or you can just say phrases of loving kindness for them, like, may you be happy. May you do the things that cause happiness. May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be at ease. So we'll do this practice of loving kindness for our benefactor. Shifting our focus just a little bit. Now we're going to imagine our benefactor doing this practice for us. You can picture them in your mind's eye. It could be the same one, their benefactor, it doesn't matter. We already have the experience of their love and kindness for us in our own heart already. So we just need to remember that, call that to mind. Imagine them doing this practice of loving kindness for you. Just smile. Smiling always helps in meditation. If you want, you could put your hand over your heart. If there's any part, or if you feel any tension or tightness in your body, you can just use the breath just to direct that energy towards the tightness and just seeing if it lightens up just a little bit. If it does, great. If it doesn't, that's okay. Just move on. No need to force it. Now we'll imagine our benefactor doing this practice for us. Now, shifting our focus again, let's do this practice of loving kindness for ourselves. And so just call to mind your own wish to be happy, your own wish to be healthy, safe, free from danger, your own wish just peace. And just gently repeat these phrases to yourself. May I be happy. May I be safe from inner and outer danger. May I be well in body and mind. May I be at peace and live at ease in this world. Just repeat one or more of those phrases. Just very gently, no need to force it. So we'll do this for the next few moments. And finally, can we do this practice for all beings in all directions? Include everyone in this wish for loving kindness. Because a wish for loving kindness is a wish of non-harming. So your wish for loving kindness will never get in the way, never interfere with somebody else's wish for loving kindness. So we'll do this to end our meditation. Just open your eyes when you're ready. Just take the next minute out in silence as you stretch your arms and you stretch your legs. Go downstairs real quick. I'll be back in just a second. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. knew right when I started the meditation that I was going to need some water, especially if I'm going to tell a story. Oh, goodness. Whew. All right. So, any questions on the meditation instructions at all? Okay. Good. Hopefully, they were relatively straight. And I started, telling the Buddha's enlightenment story. I don't even know how long ago it was, to be perfectly honest. It was a while ago. And I think Jeff had asked me to do it. And I did it for like some of the high school kids. There was a high school downtown, Cesar Chavez, which is a high school for at-risk youth. And so I told it to them a couple of times, and that was fun. It was only like maybe 20 minutes, maybe. And then I would tell it for the Dharma Bum Life people, which is Dharma Bum Life is like was a program that we used to have where it was like maybe like a 10-week program, like you would meet 2-3 times a week, just kind of deepen your practice. And I told it to them like every Dharma Bum Life, every year they did it. I told it to them. I tell this story to the DBT sorority, the fraternity / sorority at SDSU. I'm actually going to tell this story next month for them. And so I tell it every year for them. And so I've just been kind of doing it, and I really found that I like telling these stories. The Buddhism has a lot of stories, and this is just one of them. And the great thing about this story, this is the Buddha's enlightenment story from like when he was born until just after he became enlightened. And the really cool thing about this story is that there are probably like 900 versions of it. Every culture that it moves to, one of the things the Buddha said is that when you teach the Dharma, you teach it in the manner and the customs and the language of wherever you're teaching. And so just this statement would suggest that this teaching, this Dharma, is kind of told it in a way that was more maybe relevant for their culture. And so, and you know how people are. So there's 900 versions of this story, all pretty much with the same general facts, but maybe some little different things in between. And so that's why I like it, because every time I tell it, it always seems to be a little bit different. Because sometimes I forget something, like because the story is kind of long and I forget like a detail, or I add a detail that I forgot earlier. But we'll see how it goes. And it really is kind of like a reminder of why we're even here. Why are we here? What did the Buddha rediscover? He didn't really discover anything. You can't discover the truth. The truth is the truth. And so he just kind of like rediscovered it, you could say. And it's like this for every Buddha. There are the Buddha Shakyamuni, the historical Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama. He wasn't the first Buddha, according to the Dharma. There was Buddha before him and a Buddha before him, and there's going to be a Buddha after him. And the idea is that, Buddhism eventually gets lost and forgotten about. And then there's a new Buddha that comes along and rediscovers it again. So I like that. Okay. And so our story starts in what is now southern Nepal, but it was India at the time, in the Shakya kingdom. The Shakya kingdom was a small warrior kingdom. Like I said, Buddhism was about 16 kingdoms. They were all fighting with each other. This was one of the kingdoms. I think it actually was like a part of a larger kingdom. We're not exactly sure. But that's kind of what we think because it wasn't super big. And there was a warrior king, Sudhana, and his queen, Maya. And they hadn't had an heir yet, which was really, really important because all the kings need a male heir to carry on the kingdom, etc. And one day they were sleeping, and the queen, Maya, she had this dream. And she had a dream that this white tusker elephant came down with a white lotus in its trunk and entered her right side. And when this happened, the earth shook. And the earth shakes in this mythical story. The earth shakes at these very auspicious moments. And so the earth shook. And she asked the local sage what this meant, and the sage said, "Oh, this means that you are with child." And she was with child. And she had an incredibly peaceful, easy pregnancy that was exactly 10 months. Not 9, but 10. And during this pregnancy, she had no capability of causing harm to anyone. She couldn't lie, she couldn't steal, she couldn't have these inappropriate sexual thoughts or anything like that. She was just filled with loving kindness the entire time. And everybody was happy. And so it came time, several months later to have the child because she felt it coming. And the tradition of the time was that when you were going to have your child, you had the child at your mother's place, at your mother's home. And so Queen Maya packed up all her clothes and all the things that she needed, her security detail, all the animals, all her servants, all her everything. And there was this big procession to go to her mother's place so she could have the baby. And about a little of the ways there, maybe like halfway there, she ordered her caravan to stop because this child was coming now and she wasn't going to wait. And this place was called Lumbini, which still exists. And so she got out of the carriage. They stopped the carriage. She got out of the carriage and she just instinctively went to a tree. And the high tree branch lowered and she just kind of instinctively grabbed the tree branch. And that's how she had the child. It was a very painless birth. It supposedly exited her right side. And that was it. And it was, again, a very auspicious occasion. And once again, the earth shook. And it was said in the story that this tiny baby took 7 steps, raised his finger to the skies and said, "This is my final birth. This is my final one." And since she had the baby, she didn't need to go to her mother's anymore. So they packed up everything and went back to the Shakya kingdom. Unfortunately for Queen Maya, 7 days later, she died. She passed away. So before any of that happened, they made it back. And it was almost 7 days later. And the child hadn't been named yet because you usually have to wait 7 days and then you name the child. So when this child was born and the earth shook, there was this great sage in the mountains. His name was Asita, who got alerted, who felt the shaking and said, "Something is up. I need to come down to the kingdom and investigate what's going on." So the caravan gets back, child gets back. He's been there for a few days. Asita finally makes his way down and just goes up to the king and said, "I need to see this child right now." And so the king is the warrior caste. The sage is the Brahmin caste. The Brahmin caste is higher than the warrior caste, so you might think, hey, who's going to talk to a king like this? Well, the Brahmin can. He can do whatever the hell he wants. And so he just demands of the king, I need to see this child right now. And the king has to oblige. And so he did. And so this great sage, Asita, studies the child very carefully, very intently. And, the king is getting a little bit impatient. He says, well, what do you see? What is it? And Asita says, well, there are two possibilities for this child. Either way, this child is going to do wonderful and great things. But there are two possibilities. He's either going to be a great warrior king to unite all the 16 kingdoms of India into one, and he will be their leader. Or he will be a great wheel-turning sage, a great spiritual leader. And so the king Sudhana, he said to himself, well, I know exactly what he's going to be, and I'm going to raise him to be just that. And I'm going to make sure that happens. And so, of course, the queen, Maya, she passes away. The king marries her sister, which was totally normal at the time. Marries her sister, who eventually actually became the very first Buddhist nun. But that's another story. And so the king says, I know exactly what I'm going to do. I don't want him to become a great wheel-turning sage, a great religious leader, so I don't want to create a situation that inspires compassion. All right, so I'm going to keep him insulated into the kingdom. And so he built 3 palaces for the child, one for the winter, one for the summer, one for the rainy season. Anytime a flower or a plant around the palace would start to wilt or die, he had it plucked. So he never saw anything die or anything get old. All the people around him were young and healthy looking. Even if they had a cough or they started to get ill, they were removed. Because if he saw a sick person or an old person or anything like that, or something old or die, then that would inspire, that compassion will build up in him, and he did not want that. And even the Buddha would remark later, he said, I was very delicately brought up. Very delicately. I had a sunshade on my head to protect me from the dust and the dust and the dirt and the sun, to protect me from the cold, to protect me from anything that might get on me. And he had like dancing girls performing for him every single night, so he wouldn't even want to leave the premises or the palace. He had everything. The king wanted to provide everything he needed. And during this time, the king also trained him to be a great warrior. Trained him in archery, in horseback riding, in battle plan, in leadership, and all the things that a great warrior king would know. And he was really, really good at it. He was strong. He was fast. All of these things he was good at, because this was one of the possibilities. When he was 16, he married this beautiful woman named Yashodhara. And they were deeply in love with each other. And they had a wonderful life until he was 29. And at 29, this great warrior king in training was just kind of, practicing his archery. Bullseye, bullseye, bullseye. It was really good. And he says to his charioteer, Channa, he says, Channa, I'm bored. Let's go out into town. And Channa goes, no, no, you can't go out in town. The king forbids it. He goes, no, I want to go out in town. I want to go out in town. I want to see the people. Now, he's seen the people before because his father actually did take him outside of the palace, but these were very choreographed events. All the old people and the sick people were removed. He only saw shiny, bright, happy faces. So he had done that several times, but Siddhartha, which was his name, he was named Siddhartha, and Siddhartha means one who accomplishes his goals. He goes, no, I want to go. Let's go. I'm the prince. You will take me. End of story. And so he did. He said, okay, I'll take you. And so he saw the first of 4. I'm looking for the right word. 4 signposts, I guess you could say. And so he takes him out into the town, and people were smiling and blah blah, yelling, and all these kind of things. And so he sees this person that was very, very strange. Though saw this person whose hair was just kind of like this gray color that he'd never seen before, and was kind of hunched over like this and wrinkly skin, and he'd never seen anything like that before. And he says, Channa, who's that? He goes, oh, that's just an old person. You've never seen an old person? No, I've never seen an old person. Well, that's a person who is very advanced in years. And you get old and you get gray and you get wrinkly, and so it's hard to walk. And, this is why he's carrying his staff. And Siddhartha goes, well, does this happen to everybody? And he goes, of course it happens to everybody. Everybody's going to get old. You're going to get old. Your parents are going to get old. Everyone gets old. And so he goes, all right, let's go back. And so they go back. He tells his father. His father's not happy because he went out unsupervised into the city. But, he had to kind of like diffuse the situation somehow. So they put on like a big play about making fun of old people. Ha, 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 they're old, and isn't that horrible for them? But this will never happen to you, so you don't have to worry about it. He goes, okay, I guess I don't have to worry about it. And so a little while later, the same thing happens. He gets bored again. He goes to Channa, let's go out to the city. And Channa goes, no, we cannot go out into the city. But he orders him to take him, and so he takes him. And so he sees an old person. He goes, old person, check, I get that. And then he's looking into the window of this hut, and he can see this person whose skin is like really pallid and green, and he's coughing up blood and mucus, and he sounds terrible, and he looks terrible, something he'd never seen before. And he goes, Channa, what's wrong with that person? He goes, oh, that's a sick person. That's a person who needs medicine, who needs a doctor. And he's just not well, and he has a sickness. He has an illness. He goes, well, does this sickness happen to everybody? He goes, of course it happens to everybody. Everybody gets sick. You're going to get sick. Your parents are going to get sick. Everyone gets sick. I get sick. We all get sick. And so he's really, really taken aback by this, and the compassion really from the old person to now the sick person is starting to well up in his heart. And he goes, let's go back, tells his father. His father's still pissed. But, puts on a play. Ha ha, sick people, this won't happen to you. Don't worry about it. He's less convinced, but he just says, okay. He goes out again, sees the sick person, sees the old person. He gets that. And then he sees this corpse lying on the side of the road by the river. And, this was India 2,500 years ago. And so if you're not like a high caste, a highborn person who has the funeral pyre funeral pyre, you're just going to be left on the side of the road or thrown in the charnel ground, which is like a cemetery, and where the vultures and the jackals, they pick your bones and they just eat you. But this person wasn't highborn, so they were just left on the side of the road. And so the Siddhartha goes, who is this person? He goes, well, it's a dead person. It's a person whose life force has left his body. And of course, he does the same thing. Does this happen to everybody? He goes, of course it happens to everybody. Everybody gets old. Everybody gets sick. Everybody dies. You only live a finite number of years. You're not young and beautiful and youthful and highborn forever. And so he's really upset, tells his father the play doesn't work, right? Even though they tried. So again, the compassion building up. And the fourth marker, he sees all this, and he sees all the old, sick, dead people. But then he sees something he'd never seen before again, which is this man who was sitting cross-legged at the base of a tree. And, back in 2,600 years ago, during the Buddhist time, India was going through this renaissance. It was like a renaissance of spirituality. They were really sick and tired of the Brahmin caste. They thought that they were just kind of ripping the people off, because they would rip the people off. They would say, "Oh, you want a good harvest? Oh, well, then you need this specific ritual and ceremony. And it's going to cost you all of these things, sacrifices and money and all these different things." So people were getting really, really unhappy with that, because they were just ripping them off. That's what it seemed like, even for the littlest thing. Oh, you need a ritual for that, and it's going to cost you such and such. And so people will say, well, screw you guys. I'm going to go out in the forest and just do my own thing, and I'm going to find a teacher, because back during this Renaissance, you couldn't shake a stick in the forest without hitting 20 gurus of varying legitimacy. And so he's, some people during that time, they didn't have zafus back then. So they grew their hair really, really long, some of them, and they would bunch it up and sit on it. And that was their meditation mat. And so he saw this, and he saw them meditating in this meditation posture, and he goes, "Channa, who is that?" He goes, "Oh, well, that's a religious person, a spiritual person, trying to find a way out of this old age, sickness, and death. You get old and you get sick and you die, then you come back." Because reincarnation was everybody knew about reincarnation back then. They may or may not have believed it, but they knew about it, certainly. Siddhartha would have been trained in this, so he knew about that. Okay. So the idea was to meditate in a way to free your mind so that you don't come back. And so he asked Channa, well, do you think this is even possible? And Channa goes, I don't know, I guess so. And right then, he said, this is what I'm going to do. The compassion that had been building from the first time he went out into the city by himself, just was built and built and built and building up and building up and building up. And it was just overflowing in him now. The thing that his father was afraid that would happen, happened. He was no longer going to be this great warrior king. He was going to be this great wheel-turning sage, this great religious leader. But, he needed to start somewhere. And he made up his mind then that he was going to leave the palace and go out into the forest and make his way and just find the end of old age, sickness, and death. And not just for himself, but for everybody. He had everybody. He included everybody, not just himself. But he needed to find the way out himself first. He told his father was not happy. And to complicate matters even more, he just had a child like a week before. He hadn't even been named yet. They didn't even have the naming ceremony yet. And so he made up his mind to leave. His parents are not happy. But he made up his mind that's what he was going to do. And he decided to sneak out one night with Chana's help. But before that, he wanted to say goodbye to his wife and his newborn child. And so he goes into the bedchamber, and he just stopped at the doorway. And he looked at his wife, he looked at his child, and said, I name you Rahula. Because it was 1 week past, it was time for the naming ceremony. He just said, I name you Rahula. And this was really, really, really powerful. Because Rahula means fetter. Fetter is a shackle, like a ball and chain. Handcuffs. Because he was shackled to this world by this child. And he said, she looks so beautiful there, my wife and my child, they look so dear. And if I would have gone up to them, if I would have kissed my wife and kissed my child, I would never have been able to say goodbye. So that's why I just stood at the doorway and named him that. Because I would have been shackled to this world and I wouldn't have been able to accomplish my goal. And so he goes out with Chana, jumps over the palace wall, goes to the edge of the forest. Now, again, this is a prince who was very delicately brought up. He had the finest clothes with the finest silks from Benares, the finest of everything, right? And so he took all of that off. He found this tattered robe of a spiritual seeker, and so he put that on. He took a sword and cut his hair off. Then he looked like a spiritual seeker. And, he said, tell my parents I love them. And Chana was very upset. He was in tears because he was losing his best friend. Yes, he worked for him and he had to do what he said, but they were very great friends. And so he left. He wandered off into the woods to seek the end of old age, sickness, and death, the end of suffering. And he goes, well, I think I need to find a teacher. And he found a teacher eventually because, like I said, they're everywhere in the forest. And he found this guy who was really good. His name was Alara Kalama. Now, Alara Kalama was a really good teacher, and he could get up to this meditative state called nothingness. It's one of the formless states in Buddhism. It's the second to the highest one. So you get the second to the highest one, and then after that, that's full release. So he got pretty up there. So he learned Alara Kalama's meditation technique. He learned his Dharma, the spiritual teachings, and he was doing really, really well. And but after a while, Siddhartha would meditate and sit, and then when he would open his eyes, he was still suffering. And so after a while, he goes, well, this is really great, but I don't think he has the final answer. Right? And he goes, thank you very much. I've learned so much from you. I'm so grateful, but I must take my leave of you. And Alara Kalama is like, no. Look, I'll tell you what. We will co-lead the Sangha together. You are my best student ever. So we'll both lead this. How about that? It was tempting, but I haven't found my answer here, so I need to go. Thank you for everything. He leaves. He finds another teacher, Udaka Ramaputra. Udaka Ramaputra he's able to get to this next highest meditative state. It's called neither perception nor non-perception. Think about that for a minute. But it is the highest of the formless states before final attainment. And so he would, regardless of how high it was, he learned his meditation technique. He learned his Dharma. He went into meditation. He got to this perception or non-perception. He'd come out of meditation. He's still suffering. And the same thing happened. And he goes to Udaka Ramaputra after a while. Thank you so much. I've learned so much from you, but I must take my leave from you. I haven't found what I'm looking for, that final attainment. He goes, no. I'll tell you what. You stay here. You lead the Sangha, and I'll be your student. You're so good. You're better than I am. And he goes, tempting, but I can't do that. And so he just says, okay, I guess I'm just going to do this by myself. So he goes out and he finds 5 friends who are, also on their own, looking for the final attainment, the final answer, the end of suffering. And they make a pact. They say, okay, well, we're just going to do this and do our best. And whoever gets to that final attainment, gets to that final answer, we're going to come back and tell the others how they did it. So they all made this pact, and they spent the next 6 years meditating and punishing their bodies, because that was the conventional wisdom of the time. You want the mind's release, you have to get it to disidentify with the body. And the way to do that is to punish the body. And so they did. They meditated 20 hours a day or 23 hours a day. They meditated in the rain, in the heat, in the snow, on their head. They meditated on the charnel grounds. They would lay down on dead bodies and meditate, trying to disidentify with the body. They wouldn't eat, or he wouldn't eat maybe 1 handful or 1 grain of rice a day. And they did this, and he did this for 6 years. And after 6 years of doing this, he looked like this. This is the emaciated Buddha. This is how not to do it. And the reason we keep this statue here is to remind us that, yes, we struggle, but he struggled too. He did it the wrong way too. So we don't need to get so down on ourselves when we struggle, because he struggled too. He was near death. He said his skin was like translucent, and when you touched his belly, you could feel his spine. And when you touched his spine, you could feel his belly flesh. So thin he was. So near death. And finally, this young woman, this young farm girl, was walking by and saw him near death, looking like this, his eyes sunken in, his limbs like twigs. Again, near death. And she had a bowl of rice milk with her. And so she goes up to him and says, please, sir, please eat this. Please take this and eat this. And, the thought arose in Siddhartha that, I've been doing this for 6 years and it's not working. I've tried everything I know how to try, everything my friends know how to try. None of this is working. I'm near death. There has to be another way. So what if I just take this and get my strength back, so that my mental faculties will be such that I can formulate another way to do this? And so he did. And so he took it and he ate it. He drank and ate the rice milk. And his friends who were nearby saw them, and they did not like it, and they admonished him. They said, Siddhartha, you're a sellout. You're a food eater. You eat food, so you're not serious about the path. And they left him. They abandoned him. And so it took a little while of getting rice milk in him, and he got his strength back, and he got his color back, and he took a bath, and he got some new robes, and he was just kind of sitting there, and he goes, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but that tree right there, this banyan tree, is now known as the Bodhi tree. I'm going to sit under that tree until I find the final answer. And I have no idea how I'm going to do it. None. So that was the first time that he ever really just surrendered completely. He surrendered completely. That I have no idea how this is going to happen, but I'm just going to sit there until it does. And so he went to this tree, and he started to sit. And he sat. And something came to him. when he was like a 9-year-old boy, and they were doing this like planting ceremony, one of these kind of orchestrated, choreographed outings, when they were doing this ritual for a good harvest. He was just kind of sitting there one time, a 9-year-old boy, and he saw some ants in the ground, and he thought, when they come and plow the fields, these ants are going to lose their home, and many of them are going to die. A lot of the bugs and rodents and ants and whatever else that lives in the ground, they're going to have their home taken away from them. And so he remembered, oh yeah, compassion really built up in me, and he immediately assumed this role of meditation. He just sat. And as the sun came across the sky during the ceremony, the shade of the tree always remained on him. It didn't move with the sun. And so he remembered this. He goes, oh, I've done this before. I've done this before. I can do this now. Because he gave up and surrendered completely and said, I have no idea how I'm going to do this. This thought arose in him that he had done this before. He goes, oh, I can do this now. I think I can. It gave him the confidence. Because there's no such thing as like blind faith in Buddhism, but this gave him faith. And that's like confidence of like experience. And so he sat and sat, sat, and sat and sat, and he was almost there. He was almost there. And the tempter god, Mara. Has anybody heard of Mara? Mara is the tempter god, if you don't know, in Buddhism. The ego is another way to look at him, right? And he was not happy because he knew he was about to escape his grasp. Mara is the being that keeps everybody tethered, shackled, fettered to this world and prevents their escape. He prevents the escape of everybody. And so Mara saw this and said, oh no, this isn't going to work out. I'm going to need to disturb him from his meditation. And so the first thing that he did, his first way of doing this was to gather the armies of Mara that rose up and shot arrows at him. He's going to tempt him with anger. And Siddhartha just sat there very quietly. And when the arrows came, he just touched them, and they all turned to flower petals at his feet. And Mara was not happy about that. So he goes, I know what I'll do. I'll tempt him with lust. And so the daughters of Mara rose up from the ground and started dancing naked in front of him to try to disturb him from his meditation. It didn't work. And the daughters of Mara immediately turned to stone. And so anger didn't work. Lust didn't work. And so Mara was forced to try his most lethal weapon in his arsenal, which was doubt. Doubt. That's like the last thing that you really got to overcome. Doubt. And so Mara goes up to him and says, who do you think you are that you can escape me? I have everyone shackled to this earth in this cycle of birth and death and rebirth and death and rebirth. Everybody. Who do you think you are that you can escape me? And immediately, the Buddha, who was sitting like this, touched the ground with his hand. And the earth goddess, Gaia, rose up and says, I will tell you who he is. He is a person who has lived lifetime after lifetime after lifetime with good deeds, positive deeds. Lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. That is who he is. If anyone deserves to be free of you, Mara, it is him. I bear witness to this. I bear witness to his countless lifetimes doing good. And Mara knew he was defeated. And he vanished right then and there. And then it was the first watch of the night, because the nights have 3 different watches. There's like 6 to 10, which is the first watch of the night, 10 to 2, which is the second watch of the night, 2 to 6, which is the third watch of the night, right? And so it's divided up like this. And so in the first watch of the night, the Buddha kind of made his kind of first, or Siddhartha, he wasn't the Buddha yet, made his first discovery or rediscovery of people dying and getting born again according to their karma. Dying and getting born again, dying, getting born again, dying, getting born again, according to their karma. And he was able to go back to his previous lifetime, and the one previous to that, and the one previous to that, and the one previous to that. Like, okay, I was this person, I was named this was my clan, these were my good deeds, and this is how I died, and back and back and back and back and back. The interesting thing, though, is that he couldn't go back to his very first life. He couldn't go back, not even he could go back that far. So this is why there's no creation myth in Buddhism. It's just a series of worlds coming into being and collapsing, coming into being and collapsing. Kind of like a big bang and a big crunch, and a big bang and a big crunch. So, and that was the first watch of the night. The second watch of the night was where he discovered or rediscovered how suffering happens, right? How suffering happens. Like this happens, and then this happens. It's like this 12-link chain of causation of things that happen. And he also discovered when this doesn't happen, this doesn't happen. And when this doesn't happen, this doesn't happen. And so this dependent origination that Jeff talks a lot about. This is happened in the second watch of the night. The third watch of the night, he kind of discovers the Noble Eightfold Path. I'm sorry, actually the Four Noble Truths, I should say. Discovers that, the truth of suffering, that everybody suffers. That yes, there is joy and there's beauty in this world. And there's so many wonderful things to see and do and experience. But at their core, everyone just suffers. That's the noble truth of suffering. And it's noble because it happens to everybody. It doesn't matter what your class or anything else. And then he discovered why you suffer. It's the grasping and clinging to sensual things, to becoming, to not becoming. That grasping and clinging, that attachment is what keeps you suffering. And then the third noble truth is that the end of suffering is possible. When you stop grasping and clinging and wishing for becoming, and when you just understand everything as it is, you will no longer suffer. And then the fourth noble truth is just the way out of suffering. It's the steps you have to take. The Noble Eightfold Path this is the way leading to the end of suffering. This is the path you take. Right understanding, right intention, right action, right livelihood, right speech, right concentration, right mindfulness, and all the other ones. Right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. Sorry, I didn't say it in order. But so he had this realization, here's how I ended my suffering, and here's how everyone else could end suffering. And then he opened his eyes, and he was no longer Siddhartha because he was awake. He was the enlightened one, the Buddha. He was now the Buddha. But of course, when you realize something this magnanimous, you can't just like get up and walk around and talk to people. And he had to sit there for a while and just kind of absorb it all. And he did for like 7 weeks, it said. And this thought occurred to him during that 7-week period that said, yeah, this is really amazing what I've been able to discover. And I don't think, and he goes, maybe I won't teach. That was the thought. Maybe I won't teach. Because most people, when they discover this, they don't have the capacity or the wherewithal to teach. And those people are called Pacceka Buddhas, who free themselves from suffering, just like the Buddha did, but they don't teach. They just live their life in the forest for the rest of their lives. So he had this thought that maybe I won't teach. And this thought was received by one of the celestial gods. His name was Sahampati. He comes down, he goes, no, you have to teach. There are people with little dust in their eyes. Scan the world with your new powers. You will see there are people with little dust in their eyes. They will get it. And so he scans the world and realizes, yes, you're right. There are people with little dust in their eyes. So they will get it. It's okay, I'm going to teach. And then when he finally arose, he thought, well, who am I going to teach? And he thinks, oh, my 5 friends. We made a pact. And that is the tapestry that's over the door right there. That's him giving his first sermon. So he goes and he finds them in this deer park near Varanasi. And his friends see him coming and he goes, oh, that's Siddhartha. He's a food eater and a sellout. We'll just ignore him. And so the Buddha gets a little bit closer and they see something is much different about him. And he goes, well, we'll prepare a seat for him, but we won't talk to him. And then he gets really close. They say, Siddhartha, what happened to you? You look so bright. You look a lot different. He goes, no, I am no longer Siddhartha. I am the fully enlightened one. I have found the answer to old age, sickness, and death. I have found the final attainment. I am awakened. I am awake. I am the Buddha. And they knew that he was telling the truth. And so this tapestry represents the first teaching. So when he became enlightened, the earth shook when he gave his first teaching, which is called the setting in motion of the wheel of Dharma. The earth shook again. And so that's him giving the teaching. He taught him the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path. So he started at 29 on this path. He got enlightened at 35, spent 45 years teaching. 45 years. 45 years, one topic, suffering and its end. That's the only thing that he taught. All 84,000 teachings in the Buddhist canon are on that one topic. Because he says, yes, I know the secrets of the universe, but they won't have nothing to do with you reaching the final answer, the final attainment. They will not end your suffering. So I only teach this small thing. What suffering and the end of suffering, that's the only thing that I teach. And he taught this for 45 years. And he lived, till he was 80 and he passed away. And that's another story. That's a fun story. I'll probably take like an hour or so. But that's why we're here. And I love telling this story. It took a long time. Thank you. Any questions before we end for tonight? Yes, sir.
Yes. Very interesting. Very just when he was in the forest there and he learned to meditate and he tried other methods there. times. And that didn't work for him, right? So all these, and the 5 guys who were good, they were trying to reach that as well. I mean, that was the thing of the time, they were trying to reach, I guess, what they called moksha. So they, at that point, nobody, them or anybody else in district at that time had reached it, but they just knew it could be reachable, like you were saying, you almost got it, you almost got it. But to make it short, my question is, can he be considered like a reformer of Hinduism, or did he actually something fundamentally new? Because it seemed like the pantheon's the same and all this, he just found a better technique.
Yeah, so he was educated in the Vedic tradition of the time,
Right.
right? This is like kind of pre-Hinduism, but it was like the old Vedic tradition. So he would have been educated in that, absolutely. And so he uses in a lot of his teachings, because a lot of his students, that's what they understand. He would use that as a teaching method.
So it was like a Martin Luther with the Reformation idea.
Well, yeah, I mean, people were, it was going, India was going through a spiritual renaissance anyway, so they were kind of ripe for a new teaching.
I mean, I often get confused which is which, but it really doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, they have like a different, different words like moksha, and, they have, like I said, they had people who became enlightened, but they just didn't have the wherewithal to teach, so they didn't teach anybody. So they would just, they would just live their life in the forest, happy as a clam, but that knowledge would never get passed down.
You kind of still see that in modern day, where you have these Hindu gurus and just people come to them, just sit next to them and ask them questions. They don't really teach.
Yeah.
But they shy and
Yeah.
the drugs off them somehow. Anyway, thank you. Good story. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. What's your question? Then we'll have.
Is Buddhism a philosophy or a religion?
Yes. Meaning it is what you make it. For people, it is a religion. For people, it's just a philosophy. For people, it's just a spiritual practice. For people, it's just a science of the mind.
Because the reason I ask is because for me, this resonated with my core spiritual beliefs that teachers have been sent all through time and all through history in different cultures and in different forms. And this is that form of divinity at that time.
And so, guess who also was alive during that time?
Jesus, and he was taught by Buddha.
Well,
that's another story.
Maybe.
When he was there.
But I wasn't. I'm not. But that was. This is pre-Jesus. So who was? What I'm talking about is Confucius.
Oh. Okay.
He was alive at the same time.
Okay.
Around the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is all pre-Jesus. So it was Confucius. Yeah. So he was a wonderful person himself. And so what we don't like to do in Buddhism really is a lot of dogmatism, like being dogmatic about anything.
Yeah.
But we can't help ourselves sometimes.
That's why I asked.
Yeah.
Because I'm the only thing that turns me off about any spiritual practice is when it becomes dogma.
Right.
But I feel like this has that freedom and opening.
Right.
That I've always been attracted to. I've always been attracted to Buddhism and Taoism.
All right. How about our host come up here and do the final reading? Thank you guys for staying. I appreciate that. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Hello.